Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial by Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a multicolor t-shirt mockup using a free stock photo. I'll of course be using GIMP for this tutorial. This is GIMP version 2.10.12, which at the time of this tutorial is the latest version of GIMP. But of course, before we get into that, I want to direct you guys over to my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, we have tons of GIMP and Inkscape tutorials on here, as well as GIMP and Inkscape help articles, so definitely check that out. You can enroll in my best-selling GIMP 2.10 masterclass from beginner to pro photo editing on Udemy. You can support my channel and help me grow by becoming a patron on Patreon and get some awesome GIMP and Inkscape extras in return. And you can enroll in any of my Skillshare classes by visiting gimpschool.com. So here is the free stock photo I'll be using for today's tutorial. You guys can download this completely for free on Pixabay. I went with the 1920 by 1920 version. I did have to sign into my free Pixabay account in order to download this full resolution version, but that just takes a couple minutes if you guys want to sign up here. Then click download. You can also follow along with one of the smaller versions if you don't want to sign up. So here is the original version, and of course the first thing we have to do here is we have to isolate the t-shirt from the rest of the image. And for starters, what we want to do is we want to erase the background. The reason I chose this photo here is that the background is a solid white color, so it's a little bit easier to get rid of. And what I did for starters was I used the foreground select tool here. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to this tool, so I recommend checking that out for an in-depth look at the foreground select tool. But once you have this tool, and I'll hold control and zoom in with my mouse wheel, and I'm just going to show you guys real quick. I'm not going to go into much detail on this just for the sake of time, but what you want to do is just select around your foreground object, which is going to be our guy wearing a t-shirt. And in this case, we're just going to keep the jeans in there for now and the arms. We're not going to worry about that. And then you want to make sure that the draw mode is switched to draw foreground. Usually it does it automatically, but because I switched it earlier, it didn't switch over automatically there for me. So I just manually switched that back. And now I'm just drawing my foreground object with this tool, and I just screwed up a little bit there, but that's all right. And the reason this is drawing as like a purple color right now is because that is my foreground color. You can always switch using this icon here and then switch over to white. That might be a little bit easier to distinguish. So everywhere I'm painting right now is going to be my foreground object. You want to really paint a decent amount of the detail in here just to get a better final result. But again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I've already done it. But once you've selected your foreground, just hit the Enter key. So now we've selected a lot of our foreground object. You could switch here to draw background and then just paint any of the areas that should have been your background. You can't see it right here because I switched over to white, which actually maybe was a bad idea. So that has selected this as my background, and obviously I would need to clean that up a bit, but again, because I've already done this, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But once you're ready, hit the Enter key, and that'll create a selection area. And of course, assuming you cleaned it up a little bit here, you should have a slightly better selection area. But if I hold Control and zoom in, you'll see this isn't exactly perfect. So eventually you will have to clean this up, and the way to do that is you'll come over here to your Paths dialog, and come over and click to turn your selection area into a path. So here you'll see now your selection is a path, and I can click to unhide that, hit Control-Shift-A to deselect our selection area. So here is our rough path outline, and the first time I did this, it wasn't nearly as rough as it is right now. But what you want to do then is come over and grab your Ken Brewer Path tool, which is called the Ken Brewer Path tool on my channel because of my Diamond Patreon supporter, Ken Brewer. So thank you for your support. And if I click on this, you can see now I get all these nodes, and I can come in and I can clean up these nodes so that they align a little bit better to the outline of my person. And you can also anytime you have a curve like this, you can use the handle to adjust the curve. I also have an entire tutorial dedicated to how to master the Paths tool. I recommend checking that out if you're not totally familiar with how to use the Paths tool. But I'm going to delete this path because again, I've already done this, and this was my final result here. So this is the cleaned up path I did. I can click on this with my Paths tool. And so you can see I did a pretty good job here, at least in my opinion, of cleaning that up. And I didn't really clean up the arms too much or around the jeans because I'm not going to keep that. I only cleaned up the area around the outline of the t-shirt. And your guys' path will probably go all the way up the neck here. I just kind of deleted those nodes. But once you've cleaned up the path around the outline of your person, grab another tool to get rid of all the nodes so you can see a little bit better, and then grab that Ken Brewer Paths tool again. Hold Control and zoom in, and what we're gonna do is create some new paths anywhere where the shirt was not selected. So because we're not changing the color of the arms here, we just wanna select the parts of the t-shirt that did not get selected originally. So I'll zoom in a bit, and I'm actually gonna start over here on this side. It's gonna be a little easier that way. So what you'll do is just click to create a node right there, and now we're going to just outline the areas of the sleeve here, which did not get selected. We'll go about right there, turn the corner here, and obviously the more time you spend on this, as per usual, the better it will look. And we'll click somewhere out here like that. Hold Control and zoom out. And now you can just come around like this, hold the Control key and create a union. So now we have a path right here selecting out the arm. Of course, all of this is still selected. We're going to take care of that a little bit later. But now you have to do the same down here. So we need to select out the jeans and make sure that we have the outline of the bottom of the shirt here. So hold Control and zoom in with my mouse wheel. I'll create my first node a little bit outside there and just use this Ken Brewer Paths tool to select my area down here, and I'm just clicking and dragging to create these curves, which is going to create the handles automatically. And if you screw up like I did right here, you can always click on a node and just drag that handle a little bit to correct it, and then just make sure you click on this last node you left off on in order to ensure that you're drawing from that node. Just clicking and dragging. And then we get to the end right here. Actually, I'll hit Control Z. I do need to come up here because his hand is sort of cutting this part off. So there we go. And now we can wrap this around again so this part doesn't matter quite as much. And then just make sure you create a union by holding the Control key. All right, so we've got the right sleeve, or his left, our right. We've got the bottom of the shirt. Now we need to do this portion here. So again, we'll create the first node outside the original path. And I'm just quickly drawing this path here. And anywhere where you do not see a path, you're going to want to create this new path here. And then we'll come over here somewhere outside of this path. So this is the original path. And we'll just come over and hold Control and create a union. And now we only have one part left, which is going to be the neckline. Again, I deleted these nodes right here. That part's not really important because either way, this is going to get rid of this. So I'm just going to hold Control, zoom in, and hold Control Z, and just make sure that we are drawing on the neckline, and I can probably correct this handle a little bit. All right, hold Control and zoom out using my mouse wheel. Bring this around, hold Control, create a union. So now the neckline has been selected. So I'll hold Control and zoom out. So all of those paths we just created are on this single path right here, this path layer. I'm still inside of my paths dialog. And what we need to do is we need to create a selection from the main area and then subtract these areas out. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to click on that outline. So here's our person outline path. Come down here and click on the path to selection option. So if I click off of that tool onto a different tool, you can see now we have our entire person selected. And then I'm going to come up here, click on this unnamed path, which you could just name excluded areas or whatever you want to name that. So I'm clicked on my excluded areas. Now I'm going to come down here, and if I hover over the path to selection option, you can see there's some other options here. So if I hold the Control key, that will subtract path from selection. So I'll hold Control and click on that. And as you can see, that has subtracted those areas from our selection. And now I'm going to come over here and grab my free select tool. And we can hide both of these paths for now. We don't need that. And what I'm going to do is make sure that my mode for my free select tool is set to the third one here, which is subtract from the current selection. And if I hold Control and zoom in now, what I'm going to do is just loosely outline this area that I don't need in my selection. So just the arms, the jeans, and maybe any part of the neck that got selected. And we just want to make sure that we don't actually draw on this area, so only the areas we want to remove. We're just going to close that in like so. And then when you're ready, hit the Enter key, and that will get rid of that excess selection area. We'll do the same for this arm. And we can come in here like so. And hold Control, use the mouse wheel to get in here and make sure we don't accidentally deselect anything that we want to keep. Connect the first node with the last node and hit the Enter key. So now that area has disappeared. And the last part is the jeans down here. So again, just draw this area loosely. Hold Control and zoom out. We can go off the page like this. Hold Control and zoom in. Connect these nodes. Hit the Enter key. And now you can see we've deselected everything besides the t-shirt. So now I'm going to create a new path just from the t-shirt outline. And this is pretty easy to do. I'm just going to click right here to turn my selection into a path. And we can rename this t-shirt. Hit the Enter key. All right, now we have the area around the t-shirt that we want to keep. The tricky part here is going to be to change the color of the shirt so that we have multiple color options here and not just red. And I say it's the tricky part, it's not really that tricky. So what I'll do is I'll come over to my layers panel and I'm gonna come down here and create a new layer group, and I'll double click on this to rename this t-shirt elements and hit the Enter key. And I'm actually gonna double click on this and just rename this t-shirt. And now what I need to do is just duplicate my original t-shirt layer. So now I have a t-shirt copy, and I'm going to click and drag this into my layer group. So now the only thing in this layer group is this photo. And now I want to create a layer mask using the outline we have going right now. So to do that, I'll just right click on my layer group. So this is the top portion. It used to be our folder icon, but now it's the photo of whatever's in here. In this case, it's just the t-shirt photo. So I'll right click on that layer group, go to Add Layer Mask, and under Initialize Layer Mask 2, I'll choose Selection and click Add. And this is going to add a layer mask to anything that's inside of our layer group. So in this case, it's the layer mask in the shape of the t-shirt. So I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect our selection area. And now I'm going to click on the t-shirt copy layer. And I'll actually double click on this and just rename this t-shirt BW for black and white. Because now what I'll do while I have this layer selected is come over to Colors, Saturation, and just turn the scale all the way down. That'll turn that photo into a black and white photo, and I'll click OK. So now you can see this is black and white. So we're going to be using this black and white layer to change the color of our t-shirt, and I'll show you how in a second. But before I do that, I need to take care of the reflections here on the arms, because right now you can tell that it's red, and we don't want that to be red when we change the color of our shirt. So to do that, I'll come back here to the layer mask and click on that layer mask, grab my paintbrush tool, and let me come down here and make sure my colors are set to black and white. And let me shift so that my foreground color is white. My opacity of my brush is set down to 65 and my hardness is down to 21, so it's a pretty soft brush here. I can increase or decrease the size of my paintbrush by using the left or right brackets on my keyboard. And making sure I'm on my layer mask, I'm going to paint this white color only on the parts where the color is reflecting onto the arms here. So you can see as I do that, it's changing this color here to almost like a gray color because what's behind here now is black and white. So that's going to ensure that the reflection coming off of our subject's shirt is going to match the color of the shirt. And now I'll come over here and click on this t-shirt black and white layer, and I'm going to duplicate this. And we're going to use this duplicated layer in order to get the shading from the shirt on top of whatever design we're going to put in here. So I'll just come over here and name this t-shirt and erase that and put shading. And now I'm going to click on here and come down here and create a new layer. And I'm just going to name this layer color, which I've already done here. And I'll fill this with transparency and click OK. And now I can change my foreground color to whatever color I want the t-shirt to be. And so I'm going to come over here and just grab this purple color I've been using. So you can copy the HTML notation there, and I'll click OK. I'll hit Shift B or click on my bucket fill tool over here, and I'm going to fill in this entire layer with that purple color. Of course, you can't see it right now because the t-shirt shading layer is covering it, so let me just hide that layer. So this is what this looks like now. Obviously, it doesn't look great, but we're going to now add a layer mode to this, and that's going to allow this to blend in with the layer below and make it look more realistic. So I'm going to choose from one of two blending modes here, or layer modes, and it's either going to be HSL color or LCH color. That's going to ensure that only the color from the top layer is kept and that all of the other shading elements from the layer below are kept, and that's what makes this look realistic. You can check out more details on that in my How to Recolor Your Artwork tutorial that I have on my channel. So come over here and I'm going to change the layer mode here. In this case, I'll just go with HSL color. So now you can see that gives us a nice purple color here on our t-shirt. And by the way, if the reflections are too intense here, you can always come up to the layer mask and switch your color to black, grab your paintbrush tool, decrease the opacity a little bit, and you can kind of paint some of that black back in here. I think this might be a little too intense. So that fixes that up. And I chose purple for this, but you can really go with any color you want for this portion. And actually, let me come over here, create a new layer just to demonstrate. We'll name this color 2, click OK. And let's go with something totally different, so maybe like a bright green or something. Shift B to grab my bucket fill tool, fill that layer in with that color. Come over here, change this to, and I'll show you LCH color, hide that purple layer. So there's LCH color, or you can go with HSL color, which looks a little bit more accurate to the original. So that's what this looks like with the green color. And I'm just gonna hide the green because I do wanna go with purple here. So that's pretty much it for changing the color of a t-shirt mockup. But now I'm just gonna show you guys how to add a design, because what good is a t-shirt mockup if you can't have a design on there? So I'll show you an easy method for this. I won't spend too much time on it, but I'm going to open up my File Explorer here, and I'm just gonna grab a vector design I did in Inkscape. You could check out the tutorial on how to design this, but this is just a JPEG, so I'm gonna click and drag this into my t-shirt mockup here. So I just dragged and dropped that in. And now what I'll do, let me just drag this outside the layer group for now. And I'll hit Shift S to grab my scale tool, or you can click over here in your toolbox. And I'll just scale this down a little bit so that it fits on the guy. And I'm just gonna put this around the chest area here. So about right there, I'll hit Scale. I'll hit M to grab my move tool, click on this, and then just use the right arrow to move it to the right a little bit. So that obviously just looks like I copied and pasted a design on here. It doesn't look very realistic. But what I can do is I can click and drag this back into the layer group, and it just needs to be above whatever color you're using. So in this case, I have 2 colors, so I'll put it above both those layers. And I'll hold Control and zoom in a bit here. Now what I'll do is I'll unhide the t-shirt shading layer. I'm gonna make sure I'm clicked on that, come over here to Mode, and I'll change this to Multiply. I'm also gonna decrease the opacity on this layer because it's a little too intense. And you can also come over here and go to Colors, Levels, and just adjust the levels of this layer. And let me just bring up the white just so it's not so dark with this shading layer on top here. So maybe bring up this color. So there's a before, there's an after. And I'll click OK. So as you can see now, some of the shading is showing up here on our design. It makes it look a little bit more realistic. And this is still a little bit dark, so I'll come over here to Colors, Brightness, Contrast, and I'll just turn the brightness up a little bit. Maybe about right there. And the last thing I'll do to make this design look a little bit more realistic is I'm going to use the Dilli C Warp Transform tool, and it's called the Dilli C Warp Transform tool thanks to our Diamond Patreon supporter Dilli C. So I'll come over and grab that tool here, and I've decreased the size to about 215, and you can copy all my settings here. I did turn the strength down a little bit because I didn't want this being too intense. I have the Warp Transform itself set to move pixels. And what I did was I clicked on the design layer, and usually a design is going to move in a little bit because the chest is coming out. And so that is just basically adding a little bit of dimension to this. And let me actually first go to Layer, Layer to Image Size. That way the layer isn't so small here. And now what I'll do is I'll just click and drag this tool. I'll hit Control C. This is kind of, it takes a little bit of finesse here to get this to how you want it. But basically what I'm doing is I'm just moving the corners in a little bit and trying to match the curvature of the guy's chest here. You can always move some of that in, just like that. So again, the goal of this is just to have some of the wrinkles in the shirt matching, you know, what the design's doing. You can always decrease or increase the size of the brush. And you can also change, you know, the type of warp transform you're using, so maybe shrink the area. And if I just click on this, you can see it's allowing this area to move inward a little bit. Same with right here and right over here. I know some of you are thinking, why not use a displacement map on this? The reason being that the displacement map in GIMP isn't always consistent. It doesn't always work well, and so the final result doesn't always look great. So by using a warp transform tool here, you can kind of just manually go in and warp the design and make it look however you want. So I'll grab the move tool, and that will apply our warp transform. I'll hold Control and zoom out a bit. And of course I could switch between the purple and the green colors here to see what this will look like. but I'll stick with the purple for now. And let me just save this as a .xcf file so that I have this if I want to open it up later. So I'll go to File, Save As, and we'll name this T-shirt mockup for GIMP. And I'll save this in my GIMP Photos folder. Click Save. And now our mockup is saved with all of the original layers. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the bell to be notified every time I have a new tutorial. You can also check out any of my resources in the description of this video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.